So, like in your opinion, should prisons be run privately or by the government? What do you think
Um,
is the best?
okay, well, so one, you have the financial question,
Mm-hmm.
which is just what are the costs involved,
Mm-hmm.
and in general, it's probably cheaper for things to be run by a private company than by the government for a variety of reasons. In general, labor costs seem to be higher with the government than they would with a private employer. Um, the private employer has maybe some more latitude in terms of where to situate the prison, so they can buy it in cheaper lands,
Mm-hmm.
cheaper places, and so forth. And of course, the profit motive will incentivize them to. You can either think of it as cut corners or look for more efficient ways to build and run a prison. Um, but then, from an accountability standpoint, you have the question of, well, what happens when there are prison abuses? Um, what is the mechanism with which prisoners can get redress, or even the public can sort of have some oversight? And it's probably the case that there's some more control over public prisons in this sense, because they are going to be directly accountable to politicians, and then the politicians in turn are theoretically accountable to the voters. Now, voters may or may not care about this, but then you have the other avenue, which is lawsuits, that prisoners um, can bring lawsuits for violations of their civil rights if they can show they've been abused by prison guards or whatever. In a private prison, it's not that they wouldn't have any recourse, and there's going to be tort laws and so on that would address that, but they probably aren't as attractive as the civil rights lawsuits would be. For one thing, the usual rule in American lawsuits is you each pay your own legal fees. So the typical plaintiff's contingency fee might be 1/3. So whatever you sue for and you win, if you win, 1/3 of it goes to the attorney, and you keep 2/3. In the civil rights lawsuits, though, Congress has specifically written in provisions that say that if the plaintiff wins, the plaintiff is entitled to reasonable attorney's fees. So what that means is that in a civil rights suit, the lawyer would then basically submit what would be the lawyer's bill and say, this is how much time I spent on this case. And the court would look at it, and it might say, well, this looks like this is too much. And I think it's only a reasonable amount is only 3/4 of this. Or the court might say, okay, this is fine. But then the defendant, in this case the government that runs the prison, would have to pay not just the amount of damages, but also that attorney's fees. So that makes lawyers maybe feel better about taking the case.
Oh yeah, that makes
because
sense because it's a lot.
because then you know that if you win, you'll get your
Yeah.
attorney's fees. The worst thing from a lawyer standpoint might be you win the case, but the jury says, but your client wasn't really hurt, so you only get $1. Okay, so you get 1/3 of $1, and you spent all that time preparing the case. And
Yeah, that would be fun. Well, good. Our next question is: do you think the benefits of federally owned prisons outweigh those of a private prison? Kind of, sort of answered that already, but
Sort of. I mean, the big cost issue here, which I think is probably beyond your project, is do we imprison too many people for too long?
yeah.
And it's not clear that shifting to private prisons versus public prisons will necessarily really address that question. And in some ways, it maybe kind of puts it off the books in a sense. I mean, you still have the expense. You're still writing government checks for the amount that you're paying. But it's one step removed. So in that sense, I guess it seems to me it probably doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah. All right, good. And could states save money by sending their prisoners to a public facility or a private facility? Yeah, could states save money by sending their prisoners to private?
Probably. I mean, they could probably reach a contract because,
Yeah.
again, the assumption is that private prisons can do this more efficiently. So there's some cost savings, and that would be split between the profit side for the private prison, and cost savings for the government.
All right. And what are the benefits of the tax dollars in government prisons versus private prisons? What would the, yeah. What are the